who had fallen out of favor in Virginia, people that were looking for good land, religious dissenters of different kinds. It's not surprising that North Carolina is one of the colonies that doesn't have an established church, because they have such diversity of people that go there. They don't have a lucrative cash crop. They are a different place. The proprietors give them different legislatures. When the king takes over the colony, he divides them permanently to North and South Carolina. Now we want to move up into New England. And clearly, that's chapter 3 in your textbook. Clearly in New England, the most distinctive feature of the settlement of that area is religion. And that takes us all the way back, and took us all the way back to the Protestant Reformation. Now, what name, just for this, what name do we associate with the Protestant Reformation? Yes. The name that we associate most particularly with the Protestant Reformation is Martin Luther. It is because it is Luther's protests that really sparks this division. Where are they going? Where are they going? You have to sing. Oh, I see. It is Luther's, protest that sparked this division. Now, one thing that I don't want you to get hung up on is the theology that we went through. I went through and I explained kind of carefully, what Luther said, what he protested, why this was so important, what Calvin said, what was so important about that. A lot of theology was involved in this. Here's what I would see is the main parts. Right? The main parts are that Luther challenged the Catholic Church. And what he challenged was this notion of salvation. Was it by works or was it by faith? And Luther said, oh, no, it's by faith. Faith alone saves you. This is a big deal. Calvin came along and kind of gives structure to Luther's protests. Luther said, well, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And Calvin, who agrees with Luther's challenges to the Catholic Church, Calvin comes along and says, well, look, this is what it all means. This is what we think. And the thing to remember about Calvin is this notion of predestination. If you are saved by faith, if it doesn't matter what you do, then it doesn't matter what you do. That, God has chosen to save an elect few from the beginning of time. And you are either there or not, and it doesn't matter what you do. Now, if you think about it, which I'm sure you don't, but if you did, you would think that much of the controversy in New England boils down to sort of debating that it doesn't matter what you do. This idea that you're predestined and it doesn't matter what you do caused a lot of controversy in New England. A lot of debate, a lot of problems, right? But fundamentally, that's what you kind of need to know. And you also need to know that it was the Calvinists in England who eventually settled New England. Now, if I were to ask you this question, why? What would you say? So it's the Calvinists in England who eventually settled New England. Why? Carrie, right?
No.
Becky, yes, go Becky. Yes, the Calvinists in England wanted to practice their religion, but it was more than that. What did John Winthrop say in the model of Christian charity, that sermon he delivered Ben on the Arabella?
Come a city on the hill.
The city on the hill. Show the world how good it could be. Now, we know that the majority of Calvinists who wanted to purify the Church of England of all the messages of Catholicism, which were called Puritans, the majority of Calvinists, Puritans that came to Massachusetts Bay, sort of embraced that Winthrop's vision of a city on a hill, right? But there were others that came, and there's a question or two on the test about this, about the difference between those with that vision, the Puritan and the separatist. What would you say the difference between those two groups were, between the Puritans and the separatists? Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
The separatists believed that there was no
For the separatists, there was no hope, right? There was no hope. The Church of England was hopelessly corrupt. There was no reforming it, no fixing it. They wanted to separate. Now, Anna, we associate John Winthrop with the Puritans. What name do we associate with the separatists who came to Plymouth? Any name at all? That's a hard question. Anybody? That's a hard question. Go ahead, Barnett.
Was it the guy that was banned and he found Rhode Island?
No.
No.
William Bradford. William Bradford we associate with the Pilgrims. He becomes the governor there. We didn't talk a lot about Bradford, but we did talk a lot about Winthrop. Now, how does Henry VIII fit into any of this? Yes, go ahead.
Henry VIII wanted to know if his wife was the Catholic Church, but they denied that. So he worked away from the Catholic Church. He's an anti-supremacy.
Well, I barely heard most of that, but it sounded pretty good. So we've got this whole kind of division, Josh, right? And we've got these Pilgrims and we've got these Puritans. But these Pilgrims and Puritans that are there that have this problem with the Church of England, kind of the genesis of their problem is that the Church of England is separate from the Church of Rome in the first place, right? I mean, the Puritans wanted to purify the Church of England of all the vestiges of Catholicism. That's because the Church of England broke away from the Catholic Church. And it was Henry that pulled it away, correct? And so Henry makes the Church of England Protestant simply by separating from the Catholic Church. What the Puritans wanted to do, and what the separatists had given up on doing, what the Puritans wanted to do was make that Church of England Calvinistic, right? What the Puritans had given up on, or excuse me, the separatists had given up on, is that would happen. Now, what we suggested is that certainly attempting to reform or alter or challenge the Church of England was something that whoever the king was, whether it was James I or Charles I or Charles II or James II, would resent and fear. Because the king used the church to solidify their power. And so to question the church was to question the power of the king, and the king's power, particularly in England, was always tenuous. So we kind of talked a lot about that in the establishment of Massachusetts Bay in particular was central to New England. Tell me any way that you remember that the vision, the ideology of Puritanism, the belief of the Puritans spilled into how Massachusetts Bay was settled, or how it was developed, or how it was governed, or any aspect of Massachusetts Bay. So, let me rephrase this question. Here we have the settlement of New England. And central to the settlement of New England is, this whole notion of Puritanism, Calvinism, the Church of England, the status of the Church of England, a desire to clean up the Church of England, aspirations to show the world what a godly community could look like. And this is all involved in the settlement of New England. Central to New England is Massachusetts Bay. That's where the majority of people who go to New England go. That's the source of, or that's the destination of the Great Migration. And the Great Migration is this huge number of Puritans that leave England that come to Massachusetts Bay. Okay? Now my question is this. With all these visions and ideas, and how does it all eventually sort of play out in the establishment of the colony, the government of the colony, the settlement of the colony, any aspect? Yes, go ahead, Helen.
The laws are based on
So the laws of the colony were enforced, were passed and enforced in order to enforce the laws of God and to promote the vision. And so there was no separation between church and state in Massachusetts Bay, correct? I mean, so the laws of God were the laws of man were the laws of God. The idea was to sort of fulfill the vision by using the government, right, of Massachusetts Bay. Hey, was Massachusetts Bay Company a joint stock company? Was it a joint stock company? Anybody remember? Was it a joint, much like the Virginia Company? It was indeed. It was a joint stock company. And as a joint stock company, it was privately owned. And some element of what they did was, intending on making a profit, but the primary objective of the Massachusetts Bay Company was to establish the settlement. Right? I mean, in Massachusetts Bay, could people vote? Could people vote in Massachusetts Bay? But initially they had to, what was true. Initially, go ahead, Bernard.
Didn't you have to be saved?
You had to be a member of the church, therefore you had to prove that you were saved, correct? Right? So